and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the webinar on Will Drones Ever Fly in India conference call. As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I would like to introduce our speakers for the day. Mr. Nishith Desai. Mr. Nishith Desai is the founder of the research-based strategy-driven international law firm Nishith Desai Associates, with offices in Mumbai, Silicon Valley, Bangalore, Singapore, Mumbai BKC, New Delhi, Munich, and New York. Nishith himself is an internationally renowned technology enthusiast and has several accreditations in the field of corporate, international tax, and intellectual property across the world. Mr. Aditya Gupte. Mr. Aditya Gupte is a graduate from the University of Florida in aerospace engineering who returned to India to carry out extensive research in aerospace engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. He has also worked with scientists from NASA. Aditya is currently focused on developing the first three-seater flying air taxi in India by 2019. He labels himself as a young researcher, innovator, and entrepreneur. Mr. Huzaifa Tawawala. Mr. Huzaifa Tawawala heads the international commercial law practice at Nishith Desai Associates. He is also a techno enthusiast focusing on varied new age cross-border matters. He has led the research papers on artificial intelligence and robotics, drones, Internet of Things published by Nishith Desai Associates. Mr. Siddharth Ratho. Mr. Siddharth Ratho is a member of the International Litigation and Dispute Resolution Practice at Nishith Desai Associates. Apart from disputes, Siddharth has also been involved in the research and study of futuristic disruptive technologies at the firm and the potential legal issues associated with the same. He also recently authored a research paper on driverless cars. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Nishith Desai. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Mumbai to everyone, and very late evening to people on the Eastern Hemisphere, and good afternoon and good morning on the Western side. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this webinar, Will Drones Ever Fly in India? Slightly a provocative title, but I think the whole idea is to discuss, debate the evolution and of course what we call revolution of drones, and in the context of India, how it is going to unfold, what are the issues. But first thing we must do is to thank government for coming out with the draft guidelines on drones recently, seeking public input. Okay, while the guidelines have its own limitations, it is very important that each one of you on the phone, on the webinar, do provide us with input so we can collate all your inputs and also make presentation to the government so that we can have a very orderly and very creative participation in the drones regulations in India. India must stay at the cutting edge of the technology. India must be at a par with anywhere else in the world. Our experimentation and innovation driven youth are able to participate just about at the same time as anybody else can do. So if somebody else can do it in the world, we can do it. If some other country can do it in the world, India can do it. And with that spirit, we have this webinar organized. It would be wonderful to have inputs from you. And if anyone has any particular input, feel free to send me an email. My email address is nishith@nishithdesai.com. And we also have a team on drones And just to let you know a little bit about the firm, as was mentioned earlier, we are a research-driven law firm. We spend close to 35-40% of our time on research, academics, and thought leadership. And our philosophy is that every new technology, every new business model, every new social, economic, or political development brings along with it a new legal or tax problem. And in the process, what we do trend assessment and forecasting going forward 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 years from now. Try to understand what new technologies are going to come up, what are the trends on political, economic front like Brexit and other kind of stuffs happening. And based on that, we visualize the future legal or tax issues so that when the time actually arrives, we are not laggards, we are at par, and at least we are able to address. Otherwise, what happens is that we become very reactive to a situation and we lose out momentum. For example, as far as drones is concerned, the first time some issues came up and suddenly there was a ban in 2014 on the flying of drones. Then we had guidelines banning imports of drones in 2016. And now, after 3 years, we have guidelines in drafts form. So, still, we do not have regulations in India. I think this takes us somewhat behind. While we have huge talent, we are not able to progress because absence of guidelines makes it difficult for anybody to even experiment. So it is not that we are not cognizant of the government's concern on the security and other fronts, but at the same time, we cannot have a situation where we are a non-starter or we are going behind the world. So as I was mentioning, today we have specialization on drones, on a driverless car. Now we're working on flying cars. Aditya is also working on that. In technology terms and development terms, we focus on Internet of Things, medical devices, on artificial intelligence and robotics, and all these subjects will bring not only legal or tax issues, but more importantly, even ethical issues. The moment the cognitive capabilities of robots will exceed the intellectual abilities of an individual, or human being, I think we will have a very different kind of issues, including the liabilities. So these are some of the things that we really need to bear in mind. And as I was mentioning, that the drones really bring to us very good new opportunities, both in terms of technological, I would say intellectual quotient, but also in terms of generation of real new employment. We'll be discussing those things, how it will generate more employment, because things like there will be in recent time there was huge growth in delivery boys. People think they will be unemployed, but all of the delivery boys will become delivery pilots. Okay, it's not that rocket science to be a pilot as far as drone is concerned, because technologies are very simple in terms of operation, although it may be complex in technological terms. So, we'll create lot of opportunities for us. It will also have consequential situations. For example, you will have lot many filmmakers. Okay, you will have, because media entertainment is going to be major use in pesticides, in agriculture, and many other places. We'll be able to do so much, and we should harness all these opportunities. And it is very important that we have a drone environment, regulatory environment, quickly in place as soon as possible without any delays. And maybe I think when the drones will come, similarly flying cars will come. One of the interesting situation we are actually studying on that, there are three different laws today. Okay, in the context of, let me talk in context of, say, so-called driverless car. Driverless car is not future, it's present, right? But the same car will go in the sky, it will also go in the water. Okay, so you got three different laws today. One, Vienna Convention on Road Transportation. Separate law for what is called sea law, or the law of sea, and in that you got right of innocent passage. Okay. Now, Right of innocent passage means that by mistake your vessel or ship or it goes into the territorial water of some other country. You can say, I'm sorry, I go out, so you can get out. But as far as sky is concerned, you know, there is no right of innocent passage. So if by mistake your plane goes into somebody else's territory, it can be shot down. Now look at this law, air law, came sometime in 1920s and 30s around the World War time, and the aircrafts became more and more common. At that point of time, the speed of aircraft was faster than speed of communication, so you had no time to say sorry. Today we still have the same law, 100-year-old law, but speed of communication is faster, so you have a time to tell sorry, and a country can say, okay, it's by mistake, we'll let you go. But law has not changed. So we all lawyers are guilty of not, So we need to have now a law that will deal with all the three situations, on the land, in the sky, and in the sea. So we are now working on convergence law in transportation. And as you might have seen, these are technological developments on one side. On the other hand, if you look at political developments, there are more and more breakups in the world, because what is happening, more and more smaller states are becoming technologically equipped, so they are able to do as good as a large country. Okay, and the capabilities which big countries have, small countries. So people's aspirations are going. So you see, at one go, after the USSR breakup, we have 13, 14 countries coming up. Now Catalonia wants, some other country wants. So because the aspirations change, and therefore, and in the same country, the growth rates will differ widely. In some countries, okay, like in India, okay, some states are growing at the rate of 15-20%. Some states are growing negative, possibly a 1%. And the taxes paid by one state go to the other states. Okay, which is what is the obligation, that if one part of the country is not doing well. But if it goes on, some point in time, disconnect begins to happen, because the states which are paying taxes, okay, they will say, look here, our infrastructure is crumbling. We are paying tax. We are not seeing the benefit of that, and they are going somewhere else. So this kind of conflicts can give rise to different kind of political and geographical. And there was, I think, Newsweek article sometime in 1999 or 2000, at the turn of millennium. It said there will be 2,000 countries or nations in the world. The whole concept of state may disappear. State is more geography centric. Nation is slightly different, right? But when you look at these developments, and if countries are going to become smaller and smaller, the violation of airspace will become more common. Can you live with the 100-year-old law, or we need to change? And these are the things that we need to really work on. And as far as drones are concerned, they are the first target. And drones are going to be commercially so much useful, apart from what you call in agriculture, in medical. Particularly medical will be the first use. Transportation of medical supplies, even body parts like heart or transplantation of one. It's easier to transport heart from one end of the world to the other, but it's more difficult to transport from airport to the hospital. And that's the problem. And therefore, if we nurture the drone environment, we'll be able to service people better. We'll be able to create much more, ecosystem for innovations. And there are large number of benefits that go along with the recreation and other kind of stuff. So you can see countries like India, okay, like Make in India, okay. If we do not have this, Make in India would not progress, okay. People to be served in the rural areas, it's not easy to transport things. You want to supply food, how are you going to supply food? In cities, you can still send by motorcycle, but in remote area, that's another problem. So if you look at India already is about 60 to 70% services economy, okay. And if you want to further service economy, which is high value addition, low imports, okay, and quick gestation period and ability to transition technology. If you have capital investment in a manufacturing, if technology changes, you can't really, if you put $1 billion in a big factory and technology changes, you're stuck with the whole thing, including the environmental issue. But if you put same amount in services, it's easier to transition from one to the other. Okay. These are not absolute, I'm making general comments, but I think India can build on its historical strength, which is services and agriculture, okay, which is a wide use. So the way in which we look at is that let us together create a better world, okay, using our collective wisdom, all of you here present in this room and also on the phone or audio. Please feel free to give us your suggestion. We'll collate them and we'll give it to the government, and we'll also give you a copy of that. And you can send it, at least I would give my email ID, which is open to public, nishith@nishithdesai.com. That's the easiest thing I can tell you. And in today's discussion, let me just give you a perspective that we will have discussion up to about 8:30. We'll try to see if it gets closer earlier. And there'll be another 15 minutes or so of question answers. And feel free to write down your questions. So at the end, when time comes, then you are ready to ask us the questions, and feel free to do so. So it will be about hour and 15 minutes, webinar. And I really welcome you all once again. Now, with these words, Aditya, and as you all heard, Aditya is, an expert on aeronautics. He's a professor. He's teaching in IIT Mumbai. Okay, he's a young professor like me. I'm a young professional as well. Just about 50, 60, 70 years, I don't know. Don't want to disclose my age. But, okay. So, and I think if you can just give a little overview of this drones. What is drone and what are some acronyms you use so that we all can understand, and then, we can take for the discussion. So, Aditya, please, And as I mentioned, he is developing first of its kind 3-seater flying air taxi for India, and his plan is to do it by 2019. And I've seen a very early prototype, but it is in a very exciting space, and I'm really very happy that you are here with us today. So Aditya, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Nishith. So overall, if you say drones is anything which is flying. Excuse me. Drones is anything which is flying, which is unmanned. That's why many times instead of drones, you use the word unmanned aerial vehicle. That's the reason. So unmanned aerial vehicles are ones which require a minimum input from the pilot or from anyone, or right now the status is such that it's almost autonomous. So in a couple of years from now, you will see a lot of drones going here and there, doing a lot of work such as delivery work, or as you said, agricultural work. But then agricultural, highway surveillance, it's not the only use of drones. You can use it for as basic purposes as maybe like a guide dog, where you have a drone on your stick which is actually guiding you in various passages. So you
for a blind person.
For a blind person, for a very visually impaired person. So these kind of uses will be there definitely in the upcoming years for the drones. And if you see the space, I have visited the World Drone Expo in the last year, and people are using it for delivering blood to remote places, right from heart to blood, as well as in various spaces like agriculture for surveillance. A lot of it is coming up. So, and in fact, if you see, right now they are focusing on education for the children also. So you will see students or children from the 9th, 10th standard itself learning how to assemble these kind of drones. So this is the perfect context of saying that in the upcoming years, you will have a lot of drone technology everywhere in the world. This is my overview of what.
Thank you so much, Aditya. And Huzefa, as you know, Huzefa is on our technology team, and also there's a lot of international commercial contracts in the context of technology and other spaces, including on the artificial intelligence and robotics, etc. So maybe can you just give us an overview of the draft drone guidelines that have just come up and give a little historical perspective if you can?
Absolutely. So, just to sum up, what is the position of law in India today? The position of law in India today is that you cannot fly drones for civil purposes at all. There was a notification which came out by the government in 2014 which imposed a blanket ban on the use of flying of drones for civil purposes in India. So what the government said is we are in the process of formulating guidelines, but till we formulate guidelines, the drones, you cannot fly drones. That was in 2014. We are in 2017 today. Still the law is not out. So technically you can't fly them for civil purposes. The other thing what the government did was in 2016, they also laid down restrictions on imports. So you couldn't import them. So two things, you can't import them, but you cannot fly them. However, there is a slight catch to all of this. Drones are freely sold in the market today. So if you log on to any online sites, marketplaces, you go to shop stalls, they are freely sold. There is no restriction on the sale. So we are in a quandary of a situation where you can buy them, but you can't fly them. So that's just a slight overview on what the law is as of today. But in its wisdom, as the government needs to foster the Make in India initiative, needs to create the space for drone development, they have come up with draft guidelines last month, 2017. Which actually have laid down how you can fly them, what you can do. So what the draft guidelines have done is they have categorized drones into 5 sizes. So basically they start from a nano drone, which is a 250 gram drone, and it goes up to over 150 kilos, which is a large drone. So you have nano, you have micro, you have mini, you have small, and you have large. So this is the broad classification which the government has done in relation to sizes. Now there is a nexus to the size and the weight, the weight and the size. The reason is that depending upon how heavy the drone is, the regulations differ. There are certain additional requirements for a large drone. There are certain relaxations when it comes to a small drone. There are also certain exemptions which are given for the smallest drones which don't require clearances. The third category, what the guidelines tries to encompass is, as the earliest Aditya mentioned, that drone is something which flies in the air, but it doesn't just fly in the air without being controlled on ground. So there are always two aspects to a drone. One is something which is autonomous, which is flying in the air, but it needs to be physically controlled from a remote station, or it's also called as a remote pilot station. The guidelines also cover the training which needs to be undertaken by people to fly those drones. So it's not like, you just can fly the drones, out of your free will. Yes, for recreational and the small ones you can do it, but the slightly larger ones, you actually need to take training equivalent to a pilot. That's also that's covered in the guidelines. So that's the broad gist of the guidelines. Now let's discuss that. How do you actually own a drone in India? Currently it's banned, so let's go about what the law has done. The first requirement which the law has introduced, they have said that anybody who owns a drone needs to have a UIN. UIN is nothing but a unique identification number, which is unique to each particular drone. But it's not that simple. It sounds just like a unique identification number. But let us very briefly discuss, how do you get that unique identification number? There has to be a particular form which needs to be sent to New Delhi at the Department of Civil Aviation, the Director General of Civil Aviation. You need to send it to them. And in that form, there are a whole lot of criteria which you need to submit. One of the criteria is you need to tell what is the drone going to be used for. Second, you also need to tell the area in which it's going to be used. So today, if you're in point A, and you apply, you can't use it in point B because your area differs. So you need to specify the area. Also, as an individual, if you're owning the drone, you need to take a police verification clearance. You need to go to your local police station and get a clearance. Now the most trickiest out of the lot, you also need to take clearance from the Ministry of Home Affairs. So just imagine a situation. you are buying a simple drone for hobbies, recreational purposes, there are some exemptions, but broadly, if you're not part of those exemptions, to own a drone, you need to go and take a clearance from the Ministry of Home Affairs. And obviously, there is no time written that, since how long will the Ministry of Home Affairs, revert back on the clearances. After all of those
And there is
clearances,
no e-application or e-clearance? Or is
no.
there?
So we were actually coming to
Oh,
that,
okay, sorry.
but so there's no digitization in the entire process. There are annexure forms which are given, and they are physical forms. And currently, it seems that everything needs to be physically sent. There's anything digital. Assuming you get all of these clearances, and all of this is just to own a drone. You get all these clearances, then you go to the Department of Civil Aviation, the central body, and it will finally give you an approval. Now you're very happy that you have finally if you tick the box on all fronts. You're very happy that you've got your UIN, unique identification number, to your particular drone. But the question which comes is, can you fly it? Yeah, and my colleague Siddharth will take it forward on, after getting the UIN number, can you fly the drone freely or not?
So the answer is no. After you go through the entire process, as Josepha just elaborated upon, you cannot just get the drone that you own and start flying it. What you have to do before that is get a flying permit. And to get a flying permit, you have to again file a form before the Director General of Civil Aviation and submit documents which entail permission from the Air Traffic Service, permission from the owners of the land over which you might take off or land on, or over which you are flying as well, and also details of the remote pilot's training, and we'll come to how elaborate the training requirements are, insurance details if any, and also a security program which is approved by the BCAS, which is basically the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. Now, the interesting part here is, before each and every operation, before actual operation of the drone, you have to intimate the local authorities or the police station. In what manner you intimate them, whether you get a green signal from them before you fly or not, that is not clear. The second thing is, these flying permits, once you get them, they're valid only for 5 years. Now, 5 years is a long time, and forget 5 years, but your flight path might change even in a day or even in a week. So, do you have to go through the entire process of getting approvals from the Bureau of Civil Aviation and permission of the landowners? That's one question which comes to mind, and there is no particular form or particular manner in which you are required to get the permission. All it says is you have to get permission from them. And for example, there's also a provision which says that the DGCA may impose additional requirements depending upon justification on case-to-case basis. So even if you have complied with all these norms, if the Director General of Civil Aviation feels that certain other information is required or certain other specifications are required before you can be allowed to operate the drone, it may impose those regulations on you. So there is no clarity on, even after ownership of the drone, whether you can fly the drone without having to go through all of these processes. And
Yeah, I think very well elaborated. And as I told you, that Siddharth has specialization on driverless car and flying cars and flying taxis. He focuses on that area as well. And so you can see it's not only getting UIN number, the unique identification number, but also after that there are procedures in which we are stuck. I think, how would Aditya, coming back to you, because you actually are working on the project, right? How would you think the proposed regulations would affect the industry generally? Your preview, So,
Yeah. So what I think is, ideally the regulations, at least they are started, and the regulations will actually give a clearer view to the industries, the newer industries, because now their presumptuous nature, what they had they lacked or did not know about, now they exactly know what are the steps to be taken. Even though I agree those are longer steps, But now these steps, they know that when they are taking these steps and when they are within these limits, they can safely use the drones. In fact, what I see, these regulations will open an entire new platform for the industries. So even newer industries will start coming and using these drones for various purposes. So the regulations have done a good job in that manner. Only if they could improve on the process, that would be really great.
Excellent. And I think so far we thought that lawyers will be able to use papers, but it has also become paperless lawyering nowadays. So but still, we still have to use a lot of papers till such that we go completely paperless. So drones is one of the things we always feel we want to deliver this thing for signature today. We are still in quasi new economy in India, right? And we still need to send a lot of papers and get things. And if you want to send paper to the DGCA,
Yes.
I think I would ideally like to use drones, to in lighter vein, of course. And one of the things I would like Josefa to tell us is, do the draft guidelines pose any market barriers in facilitating the use of drones?
Yeah. So let's just take a moment back, right? Why are these draft guidelines introduced in the first place? It's introduced for two reasons. One is to regularize the use of drones, and second, to ensure that everything is done in a manner which also protects safety and privacy, and it's not hazardous. But the first step, that it has to regularize the use of drones, what is absolutely interlinked, that they have to make the drones available in a way which is easily flyable. You cannot impose so many restrictions that the whole availability and the flying of drones itself gets restricted. So it's like taking a step as if it's equivalent to a complete or blanket ban which is any which way is there. Obviously it's not done that, or that's not the intent. The intent is to facilitate, but there are a few things which we believe would create market impediments, especially in terms of market entry, market barriers, because we are a growing nation, right? With the whole Make in India initiative, we want people to come make in India. We want investments to come to also grow our domestic industries. So where are the market barriers broadly when it comes to these regulations? I think the first one out here is that they haven't categorically differentiated between drones for commercial use and drones for recreational, education, hobby perspectives. Now, you need to understand that these two things are completely different, and across the world over, they are also looked differently. So, if you're using a drone for a commercial purpose, the do's and don'ts, the regulations are very different, as opposed to you're using it in an education institute, say for research purposes, or you're flying something really small as a hobby, or you're conducting some recreational flying clubs, which are very common across India now. You have drone recreational flying clubs. Now they haven't gone and differentiated between any of that. What is interlinked to that is the regulations are not very clear as to what is completely exempt from a flying permit, for example, or what is completely exempt from a security requirement. Now, at certain places the guidelines specify some exemptions, but somewhere else there is a conflict. So probably what the legislators can do, even which we will try to, with the comments from everybody, is try to facilitate clear demarcations as to, if it's for recreational purposes, this is the size which is allowed, this is the height you can fly, education purposes, this is it. But when it comes to commercial purposes, these are do's and these are the don'ts which clearly need to be identified. I think the second thing which definitely can be looked, revalidated, is the whole security clearance procedure. Now, we understand that the government is little concerned in terms of can they freely fly and the security issues, but the whole procedure seems to make it more bureaucratic, more administrative, more cumbersome. Like, imagine to fly a simple drone of over 2 kilos for a recreational purpose, you need to take the clearance from the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, people would not even realize that something like that is required. We are not commercializing it. Even using a slightly larger drone within an educational premises may require clearance from the Ministry of Home Affairs. And after getting Ministry of Home Affairs clearance, which there's no time limit, as I said, you need to go to the Department of Civil Aviation. Now, all these are centralized agencies in New Delhi. and if you're sitting in some other state which is far away from New Delhi, the whole process becomes more and more administrative, which the fear from the industry feedback which we've got is it may kill the domestic industry, it may kill the usage, because people will say, oh, it's just too difficult to go and get it. The third large market barrier is that the way the law reads is only a Indian resident or a Indian owned company can own a drone. It does not provide flexibility for foreigners who come visit India, or it does not provide flexibility for foreign companies who are having operations in India to own a drone. Now that's pretty strange, because if a foreign company, say, has a company wholly owned subsidiary in India, it is for all purposes regarded as an Indian company. But it's strange that the law does not permit them to own the drone at all. So even you can't even approach the government for approval because you are not permitted to do that. Also there is a slight ambiguity when it comes to, can the owner of a drone be a particular person or a particular company, and can the flyer of a drone be a separate company or an entity? Because typically in this industry, what happens is somebody may own the drone, like take a flying club for example. Person X may own the drone, but his colleagues may be flying, members of the flying club may be flying the drone. So the law is not clear that who needs to apply for the permit. Is it the same person, or the flyer needs to apply for the flying permit? All internationally, the person who actually flies the drone needs to apply for the flying permit, and the owner, they can be different, but currently the law is a little unclear. So these sort of things may create market barriers. We are trying to foster an environment of growth which may get restricted in some form.
Absolutely. And I think at this point, I would just ask Aditya that you are in an educational institute and you want to experiment flying car or drones. What are practical problems you see? Because there are, even though law may allow you within the campus to do something, but I believe it's surrounded by buildings and other people. So can you just explain that even what are the practical problems to experiment within the university campus? Okay, and if you have to do the same experiment outside in the town where there is more open space, no other thing. So how do you, what are problems you are facing? Or
See, within an institution, even though you are allowed to fly, the problem is you have a lot of students moving around. So if you have, say, a huge drone flying around, out of curiosity, students will come and see over there. The second thing is now,
so that can damage if something happens.
If it somehow falls on the students,
correct,
that's something very bad. And even though if it's within the university campus, we still have to take all the required permissions and everything to even do some basic tests. So that's one of the difficulties that we have within a campus. And if you go outside, the biggest problem is the noise and the safety. You never know when a drone can go unstable and go and hit a nearby building or go inside a window. So that's the problem. If you go take any drone outside a campus, you never know when you lose control, because finally it's even if it's in the hand of a pilot, it's an electronic system. It can go unstable. So the problem outside is majorly because of these things, and regulations actually will help in governing those things.
And doing experiment outside the campus has its own problems, because you can't go to very open space, but you need license, you need other thing, one's license, one geography, and other kind of stuff. So I can appreciate what you are saying. And other thing, let me turn to Siddharth. I think can drones be used for kind of commercial purposes? And if you can just elaborate a bit on that. Of course, Joseph dealt with a bit, but it would be useful to get your perspective.
Yeah, so one thing we should appreciate what the government has done is, while we may, go through the nitty-gritties of the regulations and hope for better, more clearer regulations, one thing the government has done is, by in fact proposing these draft regulations, it's shown its intention to facilitate the commercial usage of drones. In fact, the regulations even provide for the dropping of certain packages by drones.
Yeah.
However, you have to get the permission of the DGCA to do that, but at least it's a start. It does recognize the fact that drone delivery can be done. Now, practical implications, might be different. For example, Amazon currently in the NCR region delivers 50,000 packages a day. If it intends to deliver all those packages by the usage of drones, you can imagine how many applications might be going to the DGCA per day for the delivery of drones. So while practical limitations might come into play, the fact remains that these draft regulations, they are out there to facilitate the usage of commercial usage of drones. They do not distinguish between recreational use or commercial use. They do not say one is allowed more than the other. They only differentiate on the basis of weight and the height that you can fly on. But whether it's for commercial or for recreational, it's out there. As long as you apply, you are compliant with all the laws, no matter how tough they are, no matter how much hurdles to marketability that there is, you can technically use it for commercial purposes. In fact, the regulations also provide for, for maintenance in terms of the RPAS system. The regulations provide that the maintenance of the RPAS system has to be done as per the procedures put forward by the manufacturer. Now, one might think that this should be more of a contractual relationship between parties, and maybe the regulations have become overbearing in this sense. For example, to impose the obligations on a person to comply with the manufacturer's requirements. So one poses the question whether, if I do comply with the manufacturer's the manual that he provides to me, and the drone still doesn't, it malfunctions and it causes damage to someone, do I just say that, okay, I've complied with all of the manufacturer's regulations, and it still failed? So would the liability be on the manufacturer or me? So it does pose questions about liability and who's who. And I guess as the usage increases and as the regulations are enforced, one will get a clearer picture on it. But at least it's a start. There is an opening for the commercial usage of drones. Only time will tell once the government becomes more and more comfortable with the technology, as well as more frequent usage, and with persons like Aditya taking the bold step of taking such innovative steps. These draft regulations might probably be redrafted, or be
Yeah.
watered down, for all
so-
you know.
So actually, you just mentioned, I think, this thing, but we have to move a little fast. Number one, because these guidelines, whatever they are, at the moment we are still stuck. Hopefully, they should be happening. Secondly, you mentioned about, say, Amazon. Okay, but Amazon is a foreign-owned and controlled company.
Exactly.
Now, if you cannot own, it's a non-starter. So these are the kind of things we should be, I think, linking up, so that the whole environment is facilitative, and
Yeah.
if the basic things are in place, I think we should let people fly. Okay.
So-
coming to the
Just two important points to add on what Siddharth said is that the good point out here is that since they have not differentiated between commercial use and recreational or hobby or educational, which means the intent seems to facilitate commercial use.
business come pleasure.
Yeah, it's a great start. Or you reverse it also, pleasure come business, whatever works for you. But two important points here is that it will all depend how the approvals are granted. So today, if I'm using a drone for a commercial use, I want to use for a commercial use, I would need to go and take the relevant approvals which we've discussed. Now the regulators are free to grant the approvals as is, or to put conditions or put conditionalities on that approval. Now time will tell as to how the government will actually look at each approval. So that is something which the government also needs to factor. Second thing is, when it comes to commercial usage of drones, at all times, whether it's commercial or not commercial, the drone has to be in the visual line of sight. Now that is a thumb rule which is taken from international jurisprudence, that at no point in time that can the drone be away from your direct line of sight. So you can't circumvent the law by saying that you can see the drone through a binoculars or a telescope. No. So even when there will be commercial use, it has to be within your direct visual line of sight.
But whose sight? If somebody is blind, he cannot fly.
So that there will have to be technology which would be
Anyway, this was a little lighter vein. I
enabled.
didn't want to distract from your excellent expose. But, some of these things are still a bit subjective and we do not exactly know. But Aditya, maybe I can turn to you. That how do you think technology can help in, say, watering down the regulations, making them more effective? If you can just
So
say a
for
few
me,
words.
the question stands: why do we need regulations? First of all, because right now we have all these drones everywhere. We are selling drones, we are making drones, but there is right now no technology which can govern these drones. All these regulations which we have talked till now say, oh, this is the amount of weight that it needs to be, this is the height. But looking at a drone, can you visualize its weight? Can you visualize its height? It's going up to say 200 feet. Even if you take the UIN, do I know that the drone in front of me has a UIN or no? Right now, we don't have that kind of technology, and hence we need regulations. But I think sooner around the world, especially in India, people will be developing these kind of technologies which will exactly inform the authorities when a drone starts. What is the weight? What is its UIN? So if a vicinity has nearly say 10 drones, you exactly know each drone, each the path it's going to take, its purpose, and this is very much important, especially when you go to airports. Airports, if these drones enter the airport, your airports are shut down. I think recently there was a in the newspaper article that they had shut down the airport because a drone had entered. The drones can cause really big damage to aircrafts. So you need some kind of technologies which will monitor these drones from entering these zones. You don't want these drones to enter in your home also. So I am definitely sure that once these technologies are made which can regulate these drones, which can monitor these drones, you would not need these regulations at all.
Excellent. And I think this brings us to a major question that on the one side, drones, expose us to certain risks in terms of security, in terms of safety, and some other risks. But on the other side, it has tremendous benefits. So, how do you create a balanced environment so that drones can fly with a degree of responsibility, either autonomous or manual, whichever way? And Husama, would you like to say something? What's the way forward?
I think it's actually a very good comment made by Aditya that why do you even need laws? Technology itself could be a legal enabler, but I would slightly disagree because as technology evolves, there will be constant legal issues which should keep coming on that. So having said that, what is the way forward is what is most important, right? Because we have a new law which is knocking on our doors. The government is hoping that early next year they will actually roll out the law. So it's like a five-pronged approach which I would look at it. It's like a five-step plan. First and foremost, decentralize. Right now, everything is getting consolidated at a Ministry of Home Affairs level or a Department of Civil Aviation. Now, these bodies are any which way is burdened with a lot of other things. Like Ministry of Home Affairs, I'm sure has thousands of other things to look into than look at an application for recreational flying of drones somewhere. So I think if you want to facilitate the whole process, try and decentralize, create separate bodies for UAVs or drones as you may call them. It will just enhance, fasten the process. Second, as most bodies are moving into get into digitization. I think just facilitating the whole process online, and I'm sure the DGCA, which is the Department of Civil Aviation, and the MHA would be looking at that try and digitize most of the things so people can actually approach the government for permissions. It's not that people don't want to, but the situation may be such that they may just give up because the government may not be accessible. So digitize the whole process whereby you can create some amount of accountability. So that's point two. The third one is, end of the day, there has to be awareness at a grassroots level, at a government level. Like one of the conditions is that you need to go and get police verification done. So at a grassroots level, from a law and enforcement agency level, there will have to be some awareness which would need to be created. In tier 1 cities, we can understand that the people are more sophisticated. But the usage of drones is not only that. It can be used for multiple other purposes in tier 2 cities just for the benefit of the tier 2 cities. For that, at a grassroots level, there has to be some amount of awareness. The fourth point is try and segregate commercial use and private professional use. Our recommendation would be don't put them in the same bucket because the use and the intent is very different. Even the liability, security, damage, which both can cause, are two very different things. So yes, we need a law, it needs to be regulated, but don't treat them in the same way when applications are filed with the government. And last but not the least, one of the biggest concerns on this on drones are privacy hazards. You know, there have been numerous number of reports, articles where people are against it because you can get photographed, and it's a massive invasion of privacy. On that front, I would like to tell all our international audiences, India right now is introducing a privacy law very soon. So that aspect would also have to be married with these regulations as and when it comes out. So this, just to summarize, this in my mind is the five pronged approach, and if that is factored, I'm sure we would foster the development and use of drones in India.
Excellent, Mustafa, and thank you very much for your comments on way forward. I think we are getting increasingly clear. At least government has put in place something so that the dialogue can start, and I'm sure they will forward this video to government as well, and hope government will listen to us. But as I mentioned, we are nearing the end of our talk. We would still like to have questions, comments, and whatever else you want to say, please feel free to. And we would like quite a few people on the webinar on the phone, so we would like to give them first right of asking question, and then maybe some people are here in the room, so we'll discuss with them. So the people on the phone can be a little free. So let us open up to the questions if anyone has on the phone.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin with the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may please press star, then 1 on their touchtone telephones. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star, then 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles.
And while people are waiting, I think if anybody wants to ask any questions, once again you can send email to nishith@nishithdesai.com, and feel free to do so. Please go ahead and ask questions, I think.
Thank you. We take the first question from the line of Abhijit Basu from SmartX. Please go ahead.
Hi, it's a very good talk, and while you were giving the talk, I read the draft document as fast as I could. And it seems like it talks more about how to get it, how to register it, what you have to do in terms of regulation, but not necessarily in terms of what the environment would look like, right? So I'll give you an example. In the US, what we do is basically there are specific zones where people, the drone enthusiasts go and fly their drones, and it's a limited area, and there's more people flying together. So it's a community as well as kind of contained environment. So given we have, and it's more of a comment that if we really want people to think innovatively, try different things, it has to be contained, so there's no hazard or risk, but at the same time there is open space where they can explore. And I think these kind of drafts should at least consider that kind of aspects of things where community will have a free space, right? And we talked about Cataluna and other democratic processes that are happening around the world. And one of the reasons is they are constrained within their democratic space. And if you do that, then obviously it does not only hassle with the innovation, but also with the civil liberties of people. So part of this draft should be an environment creation, not only thinking about laws and regulations, but environments where people will be able to kind of express their freedom to exist. Not even speech, but freedom to exist. And within that framework, we also have to think about how do you cover for the risks, right? So commercial and users should be separated, first of all. But at the same time, the users have creates more risk than the commercials. Because commercials will have their processes and all kinds of compliances, but users won't. So I think that one of the biggest thing is thinking about how the insurance will work. Because if you don't have insurance and you create a liability, that's a big issue. And I don't see any mention about how the insurance will play out. That will also kind of be taken as a deterrent, because if the insurance is there, most people won't take it as a light activity. They will probably go and get an insurance, and that will kind of cover a lot of these risks. From the commercial perspective, and as we are interested in flying drones for agriculture in India and also for monitoring, I think one of the important aspects that we see is, at least for agricultural lands, which is basically very vast expanse of land, the risks kind of come down very significantly, except the crop risk, which is a crop insurance act. So I think not only separating the commercial from the user usage, it should also be separate from usage in urban or rural area kind of differentiation. That's very important, and most countries have that. Because if it is not near the line of actual control, then it's very low risk. It's middle of a country, there's very low risk as long as there's no significant or critical business establishment or government establishment. So I think there's three things that I would like to see in the draft. One is having a clear definition of environments where people can actually express freely their enthusiasm for drones. Second, the differentiation between urban and agri or rural usage, where things are more contained and it's away from the line of actual control or any kind of government or business or aviation establishment. And third is the liability aspect of the insurance for more of commercial use versus the user use case. Thank you.
Abhijit, I must say, beautiful comments, very helpful. We really appreciate, the exposition at the length that you gave us, and certainly we, I think, will take into account. Anyone has comment on that from our side?
So just one thing.
Josefa.
Hi, this is Josefa Vishi. Just one, completely, very, very valid, as you rightly put it. When it comes to testing, from an R&D perspective, testing and demonstration, the guidelines actually facilitate that. The government has identified 22 places in the country where you can actually go and test and demonstrate your drones. But that applies only to drone manufacturers who are in the R&D stage. It does not apply for recreational and those sort of permissions, So in some form, the government has identified testing and demonstration places within the law itself. There are 22 places within the country, divided equally between north, south, east, and west.
Very good. Anybody else? Okay. So we can go to the next question. Once again, we would also perhaps circulate the content on our Nishith.tv later on, so all of you can see that. But we would like to go to the next question. Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Narinder Minocha from Chimes Aviation. Please go ahead.
Good evening. I'm retired Air Commodore Minocha from Chimes Aviation. It was nice hearing all the speakers and educating us on the drones. I just want to introduce that I'm working for a company which is, we've been operating a flying training academy for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And we are fully familiar with all the rules and regulations. And all these rules and regulations which have been made are very akin to whether you want to, get an aircraft, import an aircraft, or utilization of an aircraft. The rules and regulations are very similar, and we definitely need these rules and regulations. I do not think that these draft rules have just been made by the DGCA. I can assure you the DGCA on their own do not make these, just like all the other aircraft rules. these have all been taken from US, normally from the US or other Western countries, and have been put that how best we can, operate the drones here. So these draft rules are no different than what is there in other countries. That is one point I'd like to make. Second is, who's going to enforce these? Today, DGCA is so heavily tied up with as an enforcement agency for civil aviation rules and regulations. They do not have adequate staff to manage that. Now, how are we going to manage this? Okay, because it is fine saying that, Mr. Aditya, I think, mentioned, do we need laws? Of course we need laws, in my opinion. Unless we have laws, we'll go berserk like we are going berserk on all our roads all over, where even one red light, goes off, there's total chaos in any metro. All of us are well aware of it. So, a separate body is definitely required to regulate it. Because without regulation, we'll go berserk as far as safety is concerned. And these drones can be pretty dangerous. In fact, a drone hit is far more dangerous than a bird hit also. So the points I'm making is that yes, we need the laws, these rules, regulations. Yes, there are shortfalls in these rules and regulations. I do not say that they are not there, but we definitely will have to have an agency, enforcement agency to oversee these.
Yes.
The next point I'm just want to put this, as far as training is concerned, the regulations or the draft regulations at the moment, they have talked about training, but not gone in detail exactly what the training. In fact, our academy, when we studied this, we were looking at from 2 points. One is can we train people who would become remote pilots for the UAVs? We are looking at from that point also. Now, training is like training, people. It is far simpler than training on an aircraft. But at the same time, a person has to be skilled. And then, for that, the regulations which are laid down are not very clear. These regulations have to be similar, where a person should get a license to fly, especially when they are flying the bigger drones. At the moment, there is no clear-cut thing given on training, whether just like in flying you get a PPL or a private pilot license. Similarly, in the armed forces, they are all given a license when they are operating the bigger drones. Now, the next point I'd like to make is, as far as the drone sizes which are there, there is adequate number of drones flying at the moment. The smaller ones which are being used for wedding purposes or unauthorized use is going on. But at the same time, when you come to the bigger drones, the point is that those were the ones which can cause far more damage if they go out of control, or they are not being controlled properly by an untrained person who's not fully trained. The last point I like to make is, which has already been also pointed, the operation of this drone from commercial point of view. Okay, it's fine saying that Amazon, they'll be able to supply everything, at home. Everything has to be within visual line of sight. Visual line of sight is visibility has to be 5 kilometers. That means at any time you are operating that, and if something has to be delivered at 10 kilometers, well, you have to be in some vehicle following that, so that every time you are moving ahead and making sure that you are within line of sight of that. Otherwise, you will not be able to control it. So these are the various things which I think, as all of us will have to look into, that how do we overcome this.
Once again, excellent comment. Thank you so much. Very useful. Just that, when we take these regulations, also, for example, ownership and control of an Indian company, for example. Now we are encouraging foreign investment, and I think then it creates some practical difficulties as well. I'm not suggesting one way or the other at this point in time, but similarly, approval process is quicker and faster. Here, at times, it gets stuck, and we do not have a clear idea as to what are the guidelines on which the approval will be granted exactly. Because apart from other things, there is also such other conditions as one may deem appropriate. Some of that language also causes some legal problems. So, I think, as we say, it's a good starting point, but I think we need to make sure that if there is an approval, there is a definitive timeline. And more countries, and in fact, the first state in the world is Telangana, and they have recently introduced a rule that the approval must be given within 15 days. Okay, if it is not given, then the senior official will be penalized 1,000 rupees per day. It is not, I was there in Hyderabad a few days ago. So we need to have clearer rules, because more subjectivity, creates problems both ends, not only at the user end, but also at the administrative level. Because how would they, poor fellows, somebody will say, you did not ask this, you did not ask that, and then there is a problem because he has a responsibility. So he would obviously try to shield himself and hold up things. So we have to balance out both the sides so that the approvals are given faster. Digitization and e-governance should be introduced, and some of the rules like ownership and control. Today you cannot have discriminatory position for the once you are given license in India, then all those things follow. So there are issues to that, which of course country can do anything, but at the same time we should be mindful that we are in a globalized world where it's going to be collaborative world. There will be foreign investment, there will be Indian investment. Together we'll make a beautiful world. So I'm really grateful to you for the excellent comments that you provided, and we can move on to the next question.
May I just add one more?
Sure. Please go ahead.
You see, now, why I'm saying a separate agency, I totally agree with you that we have to resolve the issues which you mentioned. One more limitation which I find is where we need a separate regulatory authority for this. This is that how do you make sure that somebody is not breaking the rule? If somebody, you're saying, okay,
enforcement, excellent.
It's fine saying, so many transponders, all these transponders, how are you going to monitor that that person is not breaking the rules? So it's not simple.
Yeah.
So there has to be very clear-cut areas demarcated when it comes to hobby flying. When it comes to commercial use, it has to be again clear-cut. And like I said, this limitation on commercial use of line of sight is going to be quite a big limitation in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question or comment?
Next question is from the line of Vishal Kapadia from Indian Eye Security. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Just want to keep it very short with some practical problems that we face. We are a homeland security company. We have 2 drone manufacturing partners. So we work on 2 ways. One is where we sell drones, and the other one is where we get the HATS models. So we're selling drones ideally to wildlife, to CRPF, CISF, government bodies. It's not much of a problem because we are selling them the drone and they are managing it. But where we have real problems are where we're doing the HATS model, especially even with the government companies. Like we're working with some oil companies like HPCL and railways for some important projects, is where oil companies are having a lot of theft of oil from their various interstate lines, and they want drones to be managing it. So recently we applied on the 12th of October to the DGCA, and they have given us about a 15 points things that we have to follow. And as Huzaifa was saying, it is the Ministry of Home Affairs, the local administration, but also they want the Ministry of Defense prior approval before we fly the UAVs. So it's not just the Ministry of Home Affairs and local authorities, it's also the Ministry of Defense that we need to take an okay from. Also, of course, the UI numbers have to be there, the insurance has to be there, HPCL has to basically bear the consequences in case if the drones have an accident. And so it's basically a very, very tough business to deal with. one thing what they mentioned is basically it shouldn't fly under the 5 kilometers of the airport boundary. Now, most of the apps that we are flying with currently don't even go near the airport boundary. Like couple of kilometers before only it is like a no-fly zone in the app. So things have advanced more on the technology. Summarizing all these problems today, it's really not feasible for us to do a business because first of all, if we get clearance from for the UI, then we get clearance from DGCA, then they tell us now go to Home Affairs, go to local administration. For HPCL, when we were wanting to fly in Pune, I agree because of Army having their few areas, they don't want drones to be flying there because of ammunition and everything to be there. It was completely a no-no for us, and now seeing these things, it's absolutely going to be very, very tough. And here the Prime Minister is saying it should be used for oil and gas, it should be used for roadways, it should be used for railways. How are we going to basically summarize this entire big problem is our question.
Excellent, I think, comment. And as I mentioned, we will be sending out a video, to the DGCA and others who, so they can understand and take note of your points. I think one thing is that, when we try to be 100% secure, also, we lose out on any kind of mobility in terms of innovation or in terms of, doing anything else. So I think all these things are well intended, but it should not strangle it. Because there are two ways to kill a person, You can just suffocate, okay, and you can do otherwise. So, whole thing is on the one hand, point well taken, that safety and security are most important thing.
It's most important, and especially where government agencies are involved, and if they're giving it to a third party, but are taking responsibility should be a bit more, not that strengthen these rules, because it's your HPCL which is losing a lot of oil. Railways people are dying, 3,000 people are dying on a Western Railway, which we are fighting from Dadar to Borivali, sir. And Railway is paying 8 lakh rupees per person dying. We are helping them fight the problem. Where are the trespassing? So they can be less, it can be a less burden for them. So things like this, they need to address more quick is my thing, because we are losing on time.
And many other countries have advanced, they've addressed this point. It is not unique to India. So I think we also have to understand that, And Josefa, you had a point to comment?
Yeah, so completely.
Also, we got a letter now from the DGCA, Mr. Lalit Gupta, who's the Joint Director, Civil Aviation, who writes to HPCL. He says, I'm giving you the permission, but you still go and take these 3 permissions and then you can fly. So how are we going to address it? Ideally, sir, you can personally talk to Director Suyash Narayan, who is the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and have a meeting to take this thing forward. One-on-one will be more bringing clarity, because this is like now what power sector was in 2003. Unclarity and bunch of regulations.
Sure. I think we'll, as you mentioned, I think in this digitized world, first we'll be sending out this video so they can at their quiet time listen and re-listen and understand the problems. And I'm sure that I think today's bureaucracy is also wanting to think positive and do things positively. So hopefully they will take into account our suggestion and quickly come up with much better, robust environment to develop this industry. And I think the uses that you just mentioned are extremely important. If every day so many people are killed in the train accidents or other accidents, I think it is as good as saving the people on the border.
Exactly.
And also today, when we are doing the road construction, the railway construction, they are using LiDAR now, whereas a UAV can give you 300 meters left, 300 meters right. The DPR can be more clearer, because the problem in the infrastructure thing is these DPRs, because they do it on the old-fashioned thing. Now they are doing it on LiDAR, but a UAV is much more efficient for them to make a proper DPR, and projects can be done on time. So it's not just this; it's also the government's efficiency levels will increase if they get a clarity on this, sir.
So Vishal, I just have one broad comment on this. One of the reasons why you may be facing all of this is because currently there is no law. Okay, whatever is happening is ad hoc. Everybody is being super conservative. Even the government is scared to take or direct any action because there is no law. You need to understand that, right? Now, broadly, as of today, when the government is the procurer, when public procurement is happening, they can do it. But out of extreme caution, they say you go to the MHA, DGCA will tell you get MOD, which is Ministry of Defense clearance and all, because there is no law. In fact, one good thing which has come up in these regulations, if you read them, whenever it comes to public procurement or when government agencies are involved, a lot of requirements are exempt because the government itself inherently is taking the responsibility in a way which is a good sign. So if the government is procuring or if government agencies are procuring, you don't require a UIN, you don't require a flying permit. Now accountability is a separate part, but just coming back to your point, once the law actually gets rolled out, all of these things may not completely ease out overnight, but of course it will be gradually ironed out. This is the broad sense which we get.
But today's world is not about gradual.
Yeah,
It's
Today's
about
about
business at the speed of thought, and we have to all.
I just have a comment. I mean, many of the
Your name,
fears,
please?
yeah, Nimit Javeri.
Nimit Zaveri, yeah.
Many of the fears that are there, that drones will come and capture a lot of data and everything, I think they are very misplaced. I mean, you've got satellites which are there, which are, which can capture data at a much higher fidelity. So if a nation state wants to capture that data, they can easily do it. What's stopping them? Right? So you don't really need to have a drone in the country going out to secure locations and taking a detailed map out. That can be done in many different ways, far more discreetly without even the people on the ground knowing.
They can all look into your house, not only the house, but inside.
Fears are misplaced from that perspective.
Yeah.
So I think just on a separate note on that particular data point from a satellite point, that any which ways is a very large concern. It's a term which is called geospatial data. So the government recognizes things like Google Maps and the imageries which get collected. So they are in parallel also looking at a law to minimize leakage on that sort of data.
Can we have next question, please? Really appreciate all the comments that are coming up, because I think together we are trying to create a world that is better, and giving input. I think this is very helpful. Can we finish people on the call? So I'm sure they would be getting tired at some point in time. But if any more question on the phone, please.
Sure, sir. Next question is from the line of Vikram Singh from Tech Eagle Innovation. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening to all of you, sir. And it was really a nice session from your side, and thanks for organizing this event. Actually, my question was similar. Is like the two questions back. But the uses of drones, how to use a drone properly, how to operate that, and how to give a license to particular person. There is no such institutions right now in India or like outside to give a proper license. Now, coming to the training part, if an institute is giving some kind of training, first, that training institute has to be verified by some authoritative persons or institute, where we can set up multiple institutes. But if we are not giving a proper kind of education right now, that's why we are facing the problems in the transportation area as well. Right? Nobody is having license driving. Lots of persons are having driving license, but they are not knowing what are the ways to drive a vehicle properly. So similarly, we have to train pilots and the manufacturers and the operators that this is the proper way of using this. These are the regulations, these are the laws. We have to make the laws and we have to train people accordingly. So I request DGCA to set up some institutes so they can teach whoever is the newcomers, and it will help DGCA to give license as well, because there is no such written comment in this regulation or the draft.
I think, point well taken. I think that one thing is, I think DGCA may or difficulty in setting up a training institute, it should be left to private sector. But, they can lay down some standards, broad standards within which people can operate. I think government's job is to lay standard and make them public in a way that they are implementable, transparent, and not opaque. So that, I think that's the comment. I'm very sorry that we thought we'll have only a couple of questions, but we have a lot of comments, and I'm delighted to have all of them. Please, we also have people sitting here in the room, but any more questions, if people can quickly make comment on the phone, so we don't want to hold up people on phone, but if you can be a little short, quick, that would be very helpful. Any more question, any comment?
Next question is from the line of Saurabh Deroy from Bubble Fly Technologies. Please go ahead.
Sir, good evening. Nice to hear all these comments. It was a very constructive platform. What I wanted to say is today in the market, we've been like manufacturing drones over the period of last 2 years. But what is happening is the major market today is the Chinese drones which are there, which is the Chinese Phantoms or the DJI drones which are there. And in fact, the US Army had also banned them because of the fact that, you know, they relay the GPS locations and other things back to China. So the government, in my opinion, needs to strengthen the Make in India approach, wherein the people in India who are trying to get in investments or doing investments from India itself in making these drones, whether large or small, and getting into this array of drone services, need a more backing from the government in that side.
Okay. Next question or comment?
We take the next question from the line of Abhijit Basu from SmartX. Please go ahead.
Again, Abhijit.
I think I'll read the second.
So I've got a quick question this time. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about how the law needs to be redressed, but what about the timeline of this law? Is there any ETA when this law will be in some form and shape?
Early next year.
So that could help to plan.
Actually, they wanted comments by 1st of December, I believe, and they wanted to introduce regulations from the next year, early next year.
First quarter, hopefully.
First quarter or whatever that is. So, but I think obviously the time was too short for anybody to give comment in a less than 30 days and even less than 25 days. I don't know how much. But so, you know, we also requested, we are going to give comments. We already told them. And I think they would be a little flexible to hear out, you know, it's in everybody's interest. So that's, I think, the thing. We also have people here in the audience. So can you tell your name and be a little loud? So, you know, probably can be heard.
My name is Aniruddha Pradhan. I am from Rudraksha Scientific Engineering. I have a few comments. First of all, the entire policy seems to have been drafted by taking the existing CARs that are used for the bigger aircraft and watering it down. I don't think that is exactly the right approach because a drone is not meant to transport people for much of the time, and it is for very specific purposes. So this is something that can be communicated to the industry. Second of all, we have heard the MHA coming up, the name of MHA coming up over and over again. The MHA already has a procedure in place for clearances for the airlines people, Air India and all those guys, for those who are basically assigned to VIP flights. So maybe that model can be adopted, and a simpler version of that can be brought together. Third of all, I would suggest that a suggestion be given to the ministry that a separate body be set up on the lines of BCAS, the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, which will be under, which will be overseen jointly by the MHA as well as the DGCA, and that will also help in giving out something like a DPL, a drone pilot license, like you have a CPL and a PPL. So a common unified framework can be proposed instead of expecting the operators or the various stakeholders to go running around from one part of the government to another, because as we know, there are no timelines being specified for anything. And one thing that we as an industry should do is that we should have something on the lines of a DFDR, or digital flight data recorder, which is on the passenger aircraft. The data from a DFDR can be acquired, and it is required by the DGCA to acquire the data and file it with them. Now, unfortunately, what happens is that they get huge reams of paper right now, which nobody goes through. So, if there is some digital manner of doing it, then it can be actually used in a much better way, in a digital or a graphical format, so that incidents can be monitored, identified, and you can get down to the basic cause of the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Very good point, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So, anybody else?
Nishith Desai.
Nishith Desai again, yeah.
So when I look at the draft regulations, the feeling that I get is that government envisions this as an area wherein maybe 4 or 5 large corporates will be playing, and hence this entire centralization theme will work out fine for them. Where I would disagree is that I think there is a much larger market that will develop over a period of time, and hence what the government needs to do is see a model which has worked for the country. And I think the nearest model that we have is what has worked in the motor vehicles. The Motor Vehicles Act as an act is central. The implementation is local at a state level. The licenses and everything is done at a state level. The enforcement is done at a state level. I think the model should be something similar from this perspective as well. The second is, the draft guidelines are very silent in terms of what the state needs to do. From an enforcement perspective, from a regulation perspective, from the data standards perspective as well. Nothing is there, practically, right? And I think there is a need for a lot of protocols and standards to be mandated so that, the interfaces, the encryption technologies, all those are standardized from that perspective. A third aspect is, I think, something which was covered in, the discussions as well. Most of the drones will have some way of capturing the images. Whether they are meant for that use or they are doing it just because the drone is having that functionality, that's a different thing. But that data would be subject to misuse or is potential to misuse. And the guidelines are completely silent on that as well. Whose data will it be? If it's a third party, who has jurisdiction on that data? If it's a cross-border jurisdiction, what happens to it? What if it is subject to misuse? A drone could be used for delivery, but just by going on that route path, it could be capturing some data. That could be, a circumstantial evidence in case of a crime as well, or can be used against a person as well. Who actually owns the data? That becomes a big question as well, and nowhere the guidelines are clear on that perspective. I think those are the things that the guidelines need to look into much more in detail.
Mustafa, you have any comment on that?
Sure. So,
Quick
very, very quickly on 2 points, right? When it comes to data security, privacy, and all, there are separate laws which actually tackle that. Like in terms of the guidelines, also nowhere talk about what happens when there is a breach, what is the penalty and all. But there is a separate law which actually talks, which is, for example, for these guidelines, the Aircraft Act is where breaches would lie. Same thing when it comes to privacy, for example, when a drone is going and data is being captured. That is a larger issue on a lot of other fronts as well. So the privacy law which will come into place will need to be read harmoniously with this particular law.
It may or may not, right? Look at it this way. A drone is a flying CCTV.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even have laws right now for so many CCTVs that are there on the road. Both government implemented as well as private sector implemented. This makes it a huge issue.
No, so there's a slight difference. So if you look at drone as an artificial entity per se, correct? A drone, if for a moment, if we look at it as an artificial entity which is flying and capturing data, but there is one fine difference. The drone is actually being controlled by someone. So it's not autonomous in that sense. So there is somebody who has the accountability for, right? Whether it is whose ownership, that is obviously which is a privacy concern, but the accountability aspect is still there.
I would say that that accountability aspect is silent or it's grey for the simple reason that when you are flying a plane, right, the control is still human, right? Even when an autopilot is switched on, the decisions are still human. In a drone, it's still autonomous. You don't have a throttle or anything. It's pretty autonomous. I would say the automation has gone right away up to 99%. Right? Even if the drone loses the contact with the person, automated systems guide it to a way back. Right? That's the default functionality for drones. So, saying that a drone is piloted, or even when the guidelines says, it has to be in line of sight, I think technology is moved far ahead.
No, but
the regulation is not caught up.
Accountability wise, the operator is still responsible as per law.
ownership.
No, in whatever way. So you cannot completely absolve the drone operator from liability. So imagine if there is a situation where the drone goes, somebody is operating the drone, and for some reason he gets a phone call and he's answering the phone call, and the drone goes and crashes, as Aditya said, say in a public place. So in that sense, however sophisticated the technology would be, but there is an operator which was accountable.
Somebody is owning the equipment will have the responsibility.
That's where I have a bit of a grey area, right? In an automobile, for example, right? I can always say that the brakes failed or the ABS failed. It's a manufacturer's fault. I didn't apply the brakes in time. It's my fault, right? Whereas in case of a drone, if it's going over a particular path, the data is being captured, and the manufacturer has plugged it in such a way that the data can be sent out. Whose liability will it be?
So which actually we can take this offline.
We'll take.
But there's a larger debate which I mentioned earlier, that can a same person have a UIN as well as a permit. So the entire rationale was that also was from an accountability perspective. But I think we can just take that.
Your name and.
Yeah, my name is Sachin Deshpande, co-founder of Rudraksha Scientific Engineering Private Limited. My question is mainly government should look at the brighter side of allowing drones, right? There are a lot of brighter side, like we are talking about medical, supplies, right? Take an example of blood, right? Or take an example of critical illnesses organs, right? So it is very critical from that point of view, and that category has to be defined separately, and the exemption should be given considering that category as such, right? That is one aspect I'm taking. Other applications are defense applications, huge implications. Again, data plays a major role here. We don't want our data to be lying in the hands of
unwanted person.
Countries like probably China or Israel or something. We wanted to have our own, right? India,
localized.
India, local, made in India drone.
Even within India, accountability,
yes.
Because who can use data?
Yes, because data is going to play a huge role, right? That is very important. Third, very important aspect which is there, we are talking about drone, which is a hardware, but there is a much bigger component which is artificial intelligence, which is going to play a huge role, right? So nobody has talked about that in this, right? Because ultimately that is going to play a huge role when it comes to control, right? So that aspect has to be taken into consideration, and this has to go with the specialized people, and they should have a complete kind of, and this has to be taken into consideration when they are drafting probably guidelines for training, or probably the people who are going to operate this.
Absolutely.
That is what my aspect, and this particular goal to go. Last point I wanted to make, there should be a continuous dialogue. We don't want this 30 days in Windows should close down and there is no dialogue, right? There has to be a continuous dialogue.
Only people have time to respond for the 30 days.
And probably there should be a continuous
this
dialogue.
This was a little unrealistically short deadline, but I'm sure government understands that, and they are not going to reject our talk, which we'll be sending them, live. So I'm sure they understand that.
But excellent point on artificial intelligence.
And next, I think in January, we have a paper on artificial intelligence, robotics and stuff like that. So, we'll be hosting another webinar sometime in January. We are ready, but there are a lot of, we don't want to do it so soon. So in January, we'll make sure that you are there. At that one as well, there are a lot of issues coming up. As I mentioned, when the cognitive capability of the robot exceeds human, then we'll have different kind of decision-making process, and there are legal, ethical issues. So we'll discuss all of them in the future one. Anybody else has a comment? Yeah, please. And you have anybody else? No. So this is the last comment for the day. Thank you so much. Yeah.
My name is Mridul Babbar. I am from Saga Defense. I have 2-3 comments.
Your name?
Mridul Babbar.
Mridul Babbar, okay. So and from?
From Saga Defense.
Saga Defense, okay.
So first point I want to make is that the classification of the UAS should be on the basis of the payload carrying capacity, not on the all-up weight. Because an all-up weight of 4 kg having payload capacity of 350 gram is less threat rather than a 2 kg all-up weight with 500 gram payload.
Correct.
Second point I want to make is to banning of the Chinese drones because they relay the data. That is the point being already covered. So third point I want to make is the UAV there must be some labs accredited by DGCA, MHA or some other state government certified test that should test the encryption of the data that is being done. There should be protocols that will be having frequency hopping test and all that, so that no one can hack into the system and misuse when the pilot is flying the drone. And the third point I want to make is there are no guidelines such as if we want to use a drone 24/7. The night operations or day operations.
You cannot do it in the night. As per the current law, it's
sunrise to sunset.
And it's in daytime basically.
Unfortunately, most weddings happen at night, no? We don't go beyond midnight in this conversation, but
But in the search and rescue and surveillance purposes in the defense areas, we have to do the surveillance on night as well with the help of
Correct.
thermal and night vision.
For
For
government and all defense, that's it. The civilian use is only during the day.
Again, that could be some improvement, but looks like we had very interesting discussion. I really thank everyone, all my colleagues here, Huzefa, Aditya, Siddharth, and all of you who have come in person, and all those people who are still left on the phone. We had lots of registrations, over hundreds,
And even Aishwarya has
and
helped.
Aishwarya, I think she is one of our little star, and she is expert on this drones. So they are all in our team, drones team, and technology team. So if you have any question, anything, please feel free to come back. Once again, feel free to send email on nishith@nishithdesai.com. That's my personal email. I'm making it public, but most welcome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.